Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Is
Uh,
your video working this evening?
it is working, sir.
I'm just asking.
We
Okay,
can, we can
what's
see.
the color of my shirt?
Well, let me take my glasses off because I didn't go to Specsavers. Let me take my Specsavers glasses. I can see that, sir. I can see the red, your trademark red.
Is the shirt I'm asking about? Oh,
But I have to be diplomatic since it's a diplomatic session because
ah,
I can see the shirt, but I'm not sure if it's white or cream or a tint of pink. Or
there you are. Okay. Mm,
good evening, sir. To our guests, you're welcome. Um, just a quick announcement. I can see that quite a lot of people join with, I think, the names of your phones. I can see, but if I do want to call someone up, it would be good if I'm calling the name. So if you want to rename yourself, that would be helpful. If you want to make a comment, just so I can see the name when I'm calling people to make comments. Um, Sir, a few years ago, well, not too long ago, we talked about Mali. We talked about Burkina Faso. We kept sounding, or you kept sounding, that the issue of bad leadership in Africa and the impact that it's having. And then Niger happened, and we were all like, oh, not again, another coup. What can we do to stop this scourge of coups in Africa? And then we wake up to the story in Gabon. First of all, sir, how do you react to yet another coup in Africa and pretty much around the same axis in that West Africa region? How do you react to that, sir?
okay. Um, one of the joys of this platform and of this program is that at least it allows us to have a record of who saw what and what did they see. Um, so let me start off by saying expect more coups, and I will even stick out my neck, quite a short neck. I will stick it up by saying expect a coup in Zimbabwe, in Equatorial Guinea, in Cameroon, uh, in Congo, Brazzaville, and probably there are more, and probably even Rwanda itself, because this Rwanda within 24 hours retired dozens of generals. He no longer felt secure. Let me see, which other? Cameroon, within 24 hours, retired several generals. He no longer felt secure. And yet, these were people who, you see, they know what they are doing. They know what they are guilty of. They are guilty of elongation of term. They are guilty of turning their country into family legacies. They are guilty of bad governance. Because don't tell me that because you turned your country into El Dorado, therefore you are entitled to stay there forever. For the people to have a choice of who governs them is a fundamental human right. So, are you surprised that Gabon, this coup took place? You have a son who took over from his father after the father had ruled for, who knows, 40 something years. Then the son took over, and the son now had a stroke. Well, if you have a stroke, some will even argue that from the hospital you should go home. But I'm ready to concede that let him serve out his term. So Ali Bongo served out his term and then decided to run again. There are videos going around of when he visited France, how the president of France, Macron, was helping him out of his car, holding him on one hand, while he said DC, Bongo CDC was holding him on the other hand to help him out of the car, help him up the staircase before the official photograph was taken. All of this are not enough. You still decided to run for a third term. And they said you won the election. You know, what do you want the people to do? You say, this is one good coup. Let's put it that way. Normally, we should be careful about trying to make a distinction between bad coups and good coups. But this is a good coup. There is only one way to get rid of a dictator, and that is for the military, the only institution left to move against him. Because in order for them to stay in power, they corrupt the judiciary, they corrupt even the security forces. In this particular case, the head of the Republican Guard was his cousin, and he thought that was his insurance. Yeah, okay. The cousin looked after him for the first 4 years, looked after him for the first 8 years, looked after him for the first 12 years, and then probably the cousin is starting to say, wait a minute, even if I am this man's son, this man that I'm supposed to be guarding is so unpopular with the people, he's looting the treasury, he's putting his wife, his son, his daughter, well, instead of being king protector, I can also be king myself. So appointing your cousin or your nephew to be the chief of your security guard doesn't work anymore, because human traits come into it. Even if it's your son, you appoint as your chief of security, sooner or later, your son will feel, Dad, it's enough. Let me also occupy the presidential palace. So I'm not surprised at all. But I also want to remind you of one question which you asked on this program. This is I think 153rd or 154th. So I can't remember which number. Huh?
155.
All right. 155. I can't remember which particular number, where we talked about how Africa will have its renaissance. And you asked me, when would this be? And I said, when Europe, and especially France, is so committed somewhere else that it doesn't have time, or is committed somewhere else that it will remove his foot from the neck of his African countries. And perhaps Ukraine is that place where France is so committed, Europe is so committed that it doesn't have the time and the resources and the energy to keep its feet on the throats of its African countries. I recall when I was a minister, I went on a visit to Cote d'Ivoire, and I met the old man, Prof, who was the president. And we were trying to persuade him to attend the summit of ECOWAS in Lagos, and to bring along the Francophone members who had boycotted the summits for quite a long time. And he said to me, my son, thank you for coming, because you've come to show respect to an old man. Well, he said to me, why would I say no? He said, look, we realize that a time is going to come when France is going to get tired and will not have the resources to maintain its control over us. And who else in Africa, at least in West Africa, has the kind of resources that we can then turn to bail us out? He said, it's Nigeria. He said, all you need to do is be patient. Be patient. And see, I mean, that's about how many years ago, 20-something years ago, if not more. The old man had the vision that to this day was going to come in the relationship between France and its former colonies.
But there's a point you raised there that I want to drill into a little bit. And it's the fact that Rwanda retired some generals within 24 hours of this happening. Now, when we look at Gabon, we see that Gabon was head of the presidential guard. We go to Niger, he was head of presidential guard. You go to Mali, Burkina Faso, these were really senior people in the military that had come out to do, to mastermind the coup. And my question, sir, is of the countries that are left in that West African axis, because when you look at Gabon and you route that all the way to Guinea, it's almost like a U that you have there, and all those countries are now controlled by the military. What do we need to do to that role of head of presidential guard or whatever else it's called in other countries to make sure that we curb the powers of that role from masterminding coups?
I mean, how can you do that? The whole idea of the presidential guard is to provide maximum security for the president. Now, since they know that they are not going to be the people's president. They are going to run the presidency as if it's a family affair. Then they are not going to they are not going to have a presidential guard that is going to respect human rights. In fact, the funny thing is, all these soldiers who are now being embraced by the public, if you look at the history, probably 6 months or a year ago, these same soldiers were shooting at the people in order to terrorize them into not mounting an opposition against their principle. Who is the president? These same soldiers. But it shows the desperation of the people, that the same people in uniform who were mowing you down with 1 or 2 years ago, you now have to embrace them as your savior, because they're the only institution left that can move against the president. So it's like, okay, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I will forget what he did to me yesterday. But that is not, you must have a presidential guard. You must have a military. And even if you don't personalize the military, our own experience in Anglophone countries shows that they are still prepared, the military is still prepared to break its professional vows. Kotoka and Afrifa were not related to Kwame Nkrumah. In Nigeria here, Kaduna and Zeogo, Ifeajuna were not related to Balewa or to Sardauna. If you look at the history in Sergeant Doe in Liberia, was not related to President Tubman. So there, you must have a military. The antidote to coups is good governance. Good governance, responsible government, honest government. Now, let me say this openly here. I'm not going to be president, so you won't say Prof is already providing justification for his own something. Look, I don't mind 15% corruption. I don't. As long as the remaining 85% you spend on the people. You spend on roads, you spend on education, you spend on hospitals, you raise the standard of living of your people. The kinds of things that we had during the first, well, we will call it the First Republic. Let me just say the kind of things we had from 1954 to 1962 in Nigeria here. There was a report. I've been trying to lay my hands on it since actually somebody drew my attention to that there was a report that if Western Nigeria went the way it was going, that in another 8 years, it will be on the level of the Scandinavian countries. The hospital, teaching hospital in Ibadan, was one of the best in the world in those days. We had television before a lot of countries in Europe had television. We had, what did you call this Onile Gogoro? You know? Skyscrapers. We had skyscrapers at the time when it was also in Europe, it was regarded as, so we were doing very well because we had committed leaders who we saw the way in which they lived, but we still ended up having coups. So, to me, but then we know the reason we had coups. At least we had the coup in Nigeria. They messed up again with the electoral process. So respect the institutions. Have free and fair elections. Let the National Assembly do its job. If you vote money for a project, do the project. I believe the totality of that is what we call good governance. And I think that will be the check against military coups. If you bring in mercenaries, they will end up becoming kingmakers, because they will now start to dictate to you what they want. They also will want to start looting your treasury, looting your mines, looting your timber, looting what they will become a law unto themselves. So bringing in mercenaries as a check on your military is not the solution.
How worried, sir, should Europe be? Because I know that there was a meeting recently of defense ministers in Europe, and they were expressing deep concern about what is going on in Africa. Generally, how worried should Europe be? And more specifically, how worried should France be? Is this the moment for Francophone Africa to finally break away from French control?
I believe that Europe, the United States, and definitely France should accept responsibility for what is happening, what has happened to Africa, and what is happening in Francophone African countries. I have said it on this platform, on this program, and believe me, it's because an elderly man should watch his language. That is preventing me from even using stronger terms to describe what France did to Africa. Believe me, all French presidents from de Gaulle ought to be lined up and executed. Even though most of them are dead now, they should be dug up, lined up and executed in African capitals for what they did to Africa. They laid the foundation for the rot that we have here now, because they knew what was going on in each one of their territories. They supported they supported the rot that was happening to every. In fact, they're not that they supported it, they instigated the rot in every one of these institutions. They had military base there, and the military base was there to protect the presidency, regime protection against the people. I mean, we really can't start listing. They started from the colonial times when they went after their real nationalist figures, poisoned them, executed them, exiled them, until they got the kind of leader they could control, and then installed that one and maintained that one, and got them to sign I think I've gone through this on this platform before, what they call the Colonial Pact, They must not have a central bank of their own. All their foreign assets, foreign exchange, must be deposited in French central bank in Paris, and then they will be given 15% of that to spend for their own development. Should they want more, they will have to pay at market rate interest on their own money. But France will be using that money as part of its own foreign exchange reserves, claiming that that belongs to it. Any contract in any French-speaking African country must first be offered to a French company. It's only if there are no French companies interested that you are then allowed to go to a German company or a Swedish company. But that means the French company quotes the price for you. You cannot say, oh, but this is not competitive. It doesn't matter. It's a French company, and people have been overthrown for breaking that code. The last one was the president of Cote d'Ivoire. That's one of his sins, that was going to build a second bridge over the Ivorian River, and he gave the contract to a German company. So, the French did this. The British did not also have clean hands. The book that we've read about the coup against Nkrumah showed that the CIA was involved with the British intelligence agency. So they should be worried. But they are being motivated by the fear that they are going to lose control over our resources. They don't care how we are governed. And if the president wants to kill half of his people, what's their own business there? As long as it doesn't interfere with their control of the mines and the forests and what have you. They are worried about that. They are worried that the Chinese will replace them. They are worried that the Russians will replace them in Africa. That's what they are worried about. And I would have preferred that they would then come to the right conclusion that the antidote to this will be to stop backing corrupt regimes and bad governments in Africa.
Let me go to Niger quickly, sir. A few episodes ago, I think you talked about the game of chicken that you would normally have talked about. But we have the military rulers in Niger giving the French ambassador an ultimatum to leave the country. That ultimatum has been long gone now, and the French government have said the ambassador is staying put. What do you expect the military rulers to do now, sir?
Well, I hope they will be sensible and not allow France to push it into taking measures which would then force France to retaliate. They seem to be getting good advisors because rather than arrest the French ambassador, as they said they were going to do when the man didn't leave the country, they cut off the light, and they cut off the water to the embassy. So it's like a game of chess now. Next move is up to France. Let us see. But I hope that people on our panel, as well as the Nigerian coupists, will, will try to interpret the significance of the move by Algeria. Algeria that initially took a very strong stand in support of them, warning ECOWAS not to do anything militarily silly, that they were prepared to move forces, blah, blah, blah. Now had come up with what they regard as a compromise solution. 6 months. 6 months, they told the coupists. And that after that, there must be free elections. The coupists said 3 years. Their own main supporter now says 6 months. To me, that is an olive branch. That's an olive branch to ECOWAS actually itself. And through back channels, if I were advising the ECOWAS people, through back channels, I would say accept what Algeria has put on the table. 6 months, already they've done 1 month. And while you are doing INEC, put a decree in place for the parameters that will govern the new election, another 1 month will be gone, if not more. You are left with 4 months. Then after you've put the parameters in place, you must put the institutions for the elections in place. So before you know it, 6 months had come and gone. So I think that this may be the light, a chink of light at the end of the tunnel for both ECOWAS and the military regime. And again, if I were chairman of ECOWAS, I will now start to use the Algerian government as an interlocutor with these people, because then rather than the Nigerian interlocutors, I will start to use the Algerian government.
Thank you, sir. Let me go to Libya. And I'd like to hear your take on the situation unfolding between Libya and Israel. And that is the fact that Libya suspended the foreign minister for meeting with her Israeli counterpart in Italy. Why the noise we're hearing about that, sir?
Not knowing the full details, let me say, I will be surprised that a foreign minister would take such an initiative without specific instructions of his government to do that. So I think since several of my colleagues on this platform probably already know the truth, I will not. I'm not releasing any state secret, but I also recall that when I was removed as a minister, there was a meeting of the Armed Forces Ruling Council where one of the senior generals asked for the reason why I was removed. And President Babangida was supposed, because I wasn't there, was supposed to have said I was holding meetings with the Israeli government without approval, without authorization. I mean, there are a lot of things you can accuse me of, but being stupid or being ignorant is not one of them. The initial move for us to talk to Israel came from the presidency. I did not even know anything about it until I was summoned to Dodon Barracks. By that time, the special envoy of Israel was already in Nigeria. And it was then I was told to go and talk to him. So, I mean, I could write a whole book on the Israeli episode in my time as foreign minister. So I'm not sure that the foreign minister of Libya will have on his own, but maybe after the meeting became public from the Israeli side, I mean, the Libyans blew up that this was a violation of one of their own cardinal principles of their foreign policy, that they were committed totally 100% to the Palestinian cause. And so, I mean, it's any Arab foreign minister who is going to do that, it must be at this, his government must authorize him to do so.
Thank you, sir. There's an interesting question here regarding Niger. This person says, what if the head of the military junta in Niger plots a scheme through elections within 6 months to transmute to a civilian president? What would the reaction of France and ECOWAS be?
The proposal put forward by Algeria is that the elections must lead to a civilian leader, civilian government. And this must be one of the conditions that ECOWAS must lay down, and that Algeria also must lay down, that it's not going to be a kangaroo election. You don't remove your uniform and transmute, into the civilian leader. It must be a civilian simpliciter who must run in that election and who must. All the other things is to negotiate a safe passage for the coupists. But one of the conditions must not be that one of them will become the new president.
One question I want to represent to you, sir, is the fact that Burkina Faso happened, Mali happened, and everyone was concerned about what seemed at the time to be one coup too many. But since then, we've now had all these other coups that have happened. And it seems like one after the other, West Africa is being controlled by military juntas. We've had the fact that, there will be a transition plan. In 2 years, we'll be out. But some may say, well, 2 years hasn't happened for some that said they were going to be there in 2 years. But gradually, sir, It's growing. Sanctions don't seem to be deterring them. All the rhetoric we're hearing from Western countries, not deterring them. Now, when the Niger coup happened, we thought, and they started to talk about if there was military intervention, they were going to bring in the Wagner Group. Wagner Group was going to help them. Now, Wagner Group has run into their own crisis at the moment. And I'm not sure I've asked you about the developments there, but maybe I'll come back to that. But Wagner Group is now maybe no longer in a position to help like the Nigerians thought they were going to get help. Now, post the death of the leader of Wagner Group, we've had Gabon. And to me, that seems like they're saying Wagner Group or no Wagner Group, support from foreign governments or no support from foreign governments, we're going ahead and we're doing this. I know you've said good governance, but good governance is still the fact that we've still seen this thing happening. Do you share my concern there, sir?
No, I don't share your concern. You see, we must, if you are going to examine the situation, don't let us start with the coup, even in Mali or Burkina Faso. Let us look at the whole African map. Is Uganda a democratic country? Is Democratic Republic? No. Is Congo Brazzaville a democratic country? Is Rwanda a democratic country? Is Cameroon a democratic country? Is Equatorial Guinea a democratic country? Excuse me. You know, in fact, I'm glad that we now talk about civilian coups. When you add civilian coups to military coups, frankly, the majority of Africa is not governed by democratic ideals. It's not. And even, elections have been held in Sierra Leone, contestable. Elections were held in one of the things that bother me is, why can't we have an election where the opposition will accept with dignity the result of the election? It has to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Whether the election is free or not. Kenya, the election went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the present government won the election legitimately. Odinga said no, he's not going to accept, and that is going to fight the government. Maybe, you see, I'm trying to tease out the complexities in Africa. Maybe there should be a law that if you don't accept the decision of the Supreme Court, you will be committing a criminal offense and you will be jailed. Maybe when you are pulling off your heels in jail, you are not going to have time to be engineering your supporters to paralyze the streets of Nairobi against the government of the day. Maybe because in a way, when you've played the game all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has given a judgment, God is not going to come down to now give a final judgment. You are going to have to wait until we all die and appear before our Maker to then have that final judgment. But it has become part of the thing in Africa that after you've gone all the way to the Supreme Court, unless you get the Supreme Court to give a decision you agree with, you are not going to agree. So in a way, the Supreme Court is no longer the judgment seat. It's you who was defeated in the election, who then sits on the judgment seat. And of course, in demarketing the government of the day, you could even be encouraging the military to come in. So the point I'm trying to make is that this issue is more complex than we think. And I beg, think tanks in Africa, whether under under the canopy of the African Union, to have a whole conference to be devoted to this leadership crisis in Africa, the role and status of, election management bodies, or how. Because even if angels then come and conduct the elections and they give the results, the loser is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And when the Supreme Court gives his judgment, he's going to say, I don't agree. Then what?
Maybe we should have the training in Kigali, sir.
Don't try it.
It would be a good location for us to have a training program. I wouldn't go there, but I want to go to.
No, you can take our platform to Kigali, but we must all vote to go. It must be 100% of the vote, or else you are not going to get me onto that plane.
I think I can see Professor Akinyemi raising his hand.
He's never going to vote for me to go to Kigali.
I think sir, can you unmute yourself, sir? Professor Akinyemi.
Thank you, sir. It's just the point raised by Professor Akinyemi, following your question, that the French ambassador was declared persona non grata, but the French have refused to comply with that particular declaration. There are some reports saying that the junta has simply cut off social supplies like electricity, water to the consulate and to the French embassy. So whether this one is true or not, but if it is true, then the problem has become so complex, because without supply of water, electricity, and all those things there, then the war has started. Yes, sir.
Can I ask Professor Akinyemi a question? I'm sorry, I'm reversing roles. Under international law, can a de facto regime, as distinct from a de jure regime, order the expulsion of an ambassador in situ?
The problem is simply that international law itself is very silent on this type of issue. Distinction is between recognition of state and recognition of government. And in this particular case, whether a government is elected um, legally or not, until of recent, it has not always been the problem of international law. The issue is simply that the member states of the international community have the right to recognize a government or refuse to recognize the government. But that does not prevent the unrecognized government from existing as a government. So countries that do recognize the junta, there are. Mali has recognized the junta by participating actively. When Nigeria decided to cut electricity supply to Niger, Algeria said, look, Nigerians, don't be bothered. We will supply you with electricity gratis. So there are governments that have given due recognition to the junta. So countries like the United States, like France, are the countries saying they don't recognize that. But there are conventions, agreements, like it is the case with the ECOWAS, saying that, look, we will not accept a constitutional change of government. And the government of Niger, by the time that agreement was done, acceded to the agreement they signed, meaning now that that agreement, the ECOWAS, remains a supranational authority to which Niger uh, owes an obligation to respect. But the issue now is that we now have a government in Niger whose status we are now debating. And we have the junta as the de facto government. We have the ousted government of Bazoum as the legitimate government, but which is contested by the incumbent. So who is to resolve this? This is where the limitations of international law come in, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, sir. I can see, I think this is Ambassador Olusonya. Can you please unmute yourself, sir? Akinsanya, I think. Please unmute yourself and go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Olusegun Akinsanya. Prof, thanks for very clear as usual. The clairvoyance and the clarity are always very appreciated. My question relates to the new dimensions of resurgence in Africa, West Africa, and Central Africa. Of course, that of Central Africa is expected because there is considerable democracy deficits, and ECAS recognize this. I've had opportunities to ask you this question. Are there now good coups and bad coups? I mean, we would be surprised if there is something happens in Museveni's Uganda. Are we going to be surprised if Mbasogo's Equatorial Guinea, or even Rwanda and Bia's Cameroon, and one can see the reactions in terms of dealing with the generals. Do you agree that there are now good coups and bad coups in terms of narratives? My second question has to be in terms of looking at the issues in terms of in its relative context. Gabon now, many people, analysts have said that it's a charm coup. We don't know the position of the opposition. The coup leader is the cousin of Ali Bongo. And many people are saying that it's just a charade that to silence the opposition. So along these lines, will you agree that we need to have a lot of introspection at the level of the African Union? I was privileged to be part of all the narratives about development of the African peace and security architecture, zero tolerance, and many other narratives in terms of the various instruments within the AU. But silencing the guns, Agenda 2063, will you agree with me that there's need for an emergency meeting of the African Union and to now have an introspection whether we should now change all these narratives? Because it makes nonsense of all those painstaking negotiations that was had. So these are some of my perspectives. What will you agree? Now, are there good coups and bad coups? Will you agree that that the situation in Gabon is different in terms of it's going to be entre nous, as the French would say? And thirdly, will you agree that there's need for an introspection about EU narratives? Prof, thanks for always keeping us busy in terms of reflections of international relations. Thank you, sir. It's quite a mouthful, but I'm sure that you will deal with it.
Thank you.
Professor Akinyemi, before you respond, sir,
yes.
Before you respond, sir, one of the questions, because I can still see Ambassador Igali's hand raised, that I want to take his comments, but I think you have already answered one of the questions around good coups or bad coups. Maybe we should address the ones you haven't answered before, so I can take other people, sir. To Ambassador Akinyemi, apologies, sir, for that, if you don't mind, but Prof already answered that one.
Well, no, I can answer in one sentence that
Okay,
I have said there are now good coups and there are bad coups. And it simply shows the development of the situation that is leading one to say this. But having said that now, you've brought in this situation that the man is his cousin. And again, I have dealt with it. Let me say, yes, I mean, that's what diplomats are there for. So that you will have an emergency meeting of the AU, African Union. But then you also have just said maybe some introspection. And the problem with introspection and coups is the longer you withhold judgment, the more the coupists entrench themselves. So it's almost like, if you don't mind my saying so, the baby has come. Is it a boy or is it a girl? The doctor must give you an answer and not tell you, well, let's sleep over the matter before deciding, the sex of the baby. The coup has taken place. Unless you could reverse the coup within 24 hours, a coup is a coup. And there was this, I don't know whether it was Shakespeare or Milton, who says, oh dear, I can't remember the exact words, but something about why is a coup never treason? Because if it succeeds, nobody dares call it trees. Something like that. I'm sure there's somebody on our platform whose memory about literature is better than mine. And so that is the situation with schools now. Once it has taken place, short of you sending in troops within 24 hours, it becomes entrenched.
Thank you, sir. So I've got 3 hands raised here, and I will take all 3 that I can see before we close tonight. Ambassador Igali, I think the next person was Oyegoke Omigbodun, and third would be Omotola Ilesomi. So Ambassador Igali, if you can go on, sir. Bear with me. You need to be able to unmute yourself. Let's get that sorted for you. 1 second. Ambassador Igali, can you unmute yourself now, sir? Yes, you're muted. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Prof, once more, it's good to see you again, and we've again been refreshed. Mine is a comment which I believe you can further elucidate on. We've not mentioned the aspect of the economic circumstances of the typical African state. This spiral of coups may not abate as long as a lot of our countries are undergoing very serious economic crisis. When elections take place, people expect the new governments to come up with a magic wand to solve the problems, but then they inherit compounded problems, and this leads to despair. And that is why easily the military to my mind, the military jumps in and gets the kind of applause. Coups will become unpopular, coups will become unacceptable if there are certain irreducible conditions of existence for the population. Now, we may not have a right to demand of Europe to come and solve all our problems, but I think that at the level of the African Union, we have to start a new dialogue. We have to start talking a conversation with the G20 countries for them to maybe something like a kind of Marshall Plan type of arrangement to be able to get some of African countries out of their present economic situations. I want to hear your comments on this matter, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador Igali. The conundrum arises from the fact that the economic situations in all African countries, even that have had coups, are not the same. Niger, yes, Niger is poor, but rich in resources. Gabon is immensely rich in resources, but because of the lack of distributive justice, lack of distributive social justice, both countries, their people remain poor, and therefore their country really remain poor. And I will say that we don't need that we don't need a Marshall Plan for. Even look at Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, extremely rich in resources, but unable to govern itself or not being allowed to govern itself. What I would like us to see, and I haven't thought of this are beyond scratching my head is if using the instrumentality of the African Union, we can come up with a charter of democracy and development, which we can enforce. Because the unfortunate thing is, it is people, from charlatans from Europe, from the United States, who come and exploit our nations. So the first thing is, how can we stop them from coming? Their government must be engaged in stopping their citizens from coming in. They must criminalize the activities of their citizens in Africa when they cross the red line. So that will be the first one. The second one I will now subscribe to your Marshall Plan, but be a Marshall Plan, engineered by the African Union, because we don't need those resources to come from Europe, but we need somebody who will help us enforce that. That's my reaction to. But as I said, Ambassador Gali, this is just off the top of my head. It's not something I have thought through. But again, I am challenging NIPS, I'm challenging NIA, I'm challenging the Academy of International Affairs to, whether jointly or separately, to let us think these things through. I mean, surely if the AU is going to meet, we can have this feeding to the AU, rather than when they call their meeting in Addis Ababa, we then expect them to come up with. They also must engineer think tanks in Africa to help them think through some of these issues you've raised.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, sir. But just before I go to Oyebokomi, sir, there's a lot of questions and comments about BRICS and things like that going over so many mediums. And I know, sir, that there is a program planned for Saturday. Do you want to just tell us what people should expect on Saturday on this program? Because I've deliberately avoided the BRICS questions that people had sent before this meeting, because I knew this was coming up. What should we expect on Saturday, sir?
You should expect a robust debate, a robust interchange of ideas, questions, answers, questions that we may not be able to answer. What often some people will say, the unknown knowns, the knowns knowns, the knowns unknowns about this issue of BRICS and Nigeria. This will be the first outing of this new think tank that we've just set up in Nigeria, the Academy of International Affairs. And this is going to be typical of our own attitude. This is made up of fellows who are all over 70 years old, retired ambassadors, retired permanent secretaries, retired professors of international relations. We don't make a claim that we know everything. And that's why we are then inviting Nigerians. When I was GGNI, I usually refer to as the foreign policy elite, the thinkers in foreign policy, to join us. We are providing the platform. And let us have a robust debate on what is it about BRICS. Should we be members? Should we beg to be members? Are there things we should do? Or are there alternative paths to Nigerian foreign policy that doesn't have to be BRICS for us to be relevant in the evolution of this new world order? I hold that I can be challenged I hold that now we have two whatever names you want to call it, a West profile and BRICS, irrespective of its initial good profile, has become an anti-West profile. And in the middle now are countries, medium powers, big powers, who are not part of the pro-West or anti-West groups. In Turkey, Malaysia, Mexico, in Indonesia, Nigeria, Senegal, who are there and who can be classified, if you like, a new non-aligned group. Because you cannot have a BRICS that has as part of its members Russia and China, and you claim it's non-aligned. You'll just be playing with words. So on Saturday, 2 to 5, we are providing this platform for Nigerians through Zoom to join us in having a robust debate on BRICS.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir. And now to, I think it's Dr. Omigbodun, if I'm not mistaken. Please go ahead, unmute yourself and talk, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I am not doctor. I am reverend.
Apologies.
Okay. Yes, and I have two quick questions for Prof. One can be answered straight away now, but it seems to me like the other one can as well. Just be quickly glossed over now and perhaps more appropriately answered on Saturday. The first is the one I put on the screen, on the chat screen, that it seems the kind of the brand, the caliber of leadership and the way things are run in Africa makes one to wonder good governance and democracy not seemingly mutually exclusive for us. I sometimes hear people talking of benevolent dictatorship. You just spoke now that Rwanda is not a democracy, is not a true democracy. It seems to be getting on. And whether you like it or not, the growth that China has experienced has nothing to do with what they call democracy in the West, even if China will pretend and say it's a socialist democracy. So what if now we've truly find that they seem to be mutually exclusive? So where should we pitch our tent? Is it with democracy or with good governance? I don't know if I put that question right, because we will always say that the best form of military leadership is worse than the worst form of democracy. But are we really getting good governance with democracy? Our brand of democracy, and should we stick to it? That's the first question. And the second one is about BRICS, and it's about should we, in Africa, perhaps Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, are we too weak to also emerge one way or the other, rather than running away from the dollar and going to join the yen or whatever other thing they emerge on the other side? Can't we also boldly launch out and seek association amongst ourselves first, and others may probably also join us in moving something unique forward, not necessarily tied to the East or the West?
Thank you for that, sir.
Thank you, Reverend Omigbodun. As you rightly said, okay, BRICS will roll over until Saturday. On this program, on this platform, we've scattered around the issue of development versus democracy. I even think we had a town hall about it. Frankly, I haven't landed, even mentally, intellectually. I'm debating it really within myself, which one will pay us more in a culture or in a nationality that is made up of nationalities. Should we be emphasizing democracy when the political parties are then grounded on loyalty to these sub-nationalities? If a country is made up of ethnic groups A, B, C, and the parties are based on A, B, C, in fact, are you not asking for the impossible when you then ask some people in A to migrate when it's election time and vote for party grounded on B? And expect that people from C will migrate and vote for a party grounded on A. And yet that's what we do in Africa, and that's why we don't get it right. Let us really face it. We don't get it right. And that is why, after each election, you have people say, okay, maybe we should have a national government, which to me is a euphemism for let's have a one-party system. And a one-party system is really, there's no way you could say one-party system is democratic. Tanzania played with that. Whether they've got it right or not, I don't really know. But you've raised a question again to which I hope there will be robust debates. We've got to get away from what we inherited from the Western system. Because in a way, even when you look at the United States now, will you say democracy is working there? 70 million or so are pro-Trump. There is nothing he can do that would dent their loyalty to him. Now, is that democracy? I thought democracy is based on, debates, rationality, and after that, you come to a conclusion, and that conclusion then dictates your action. But when from ab initio, you've decided it is this, it's my tribe, it's Trump, I'm a Trumpist, and then you say you have democracy. No. So, but yet we embraced what was sold to us, the kind of democracy that was sold to us from Western countries. And the trouble it created for us, we still have not got over it. So, Reverend Migbodo, thank you for raising that issue. I'm glad that these issues are coming up because it shows things we need to think about. And hopefully in the process, we will have a consensus.
Yes, sir. Sir, there are two questions here. Well, one hand raised, and there is a comment from, I think this is Senator Olajumoke, if I'm not mistaken. He said, his question here is, would it not be tantamount to intimidation for a government in power to promulgate laws criminalizing negative opposition reactions even after a Supreme Court ruling? My sincere opinion is that evidence of good governance and sincerity on purpose within a short span of coming to power is the panacea to stall coups. Finally, what is the difference between a good coup and popular coup. And linked to that, someone else has said, for want of a proper yardstick on the question of good governance, this is from someone called Wazir. I will suggest that the parameter should be set around how popular a coup d'etat is among the civilian population when we have a handful of citizens jubilating triumphantly. It may not be a bad coup. Yes, I've got that. Oh dear. We're out of time, sir. And apologies to the two hands that I have raised. I am 24 minutes over. But let's come back to Saturday. We'll have the discussion on Saturday. And hopefully next week, Thursday, maybe some of these questions can come up again. So apologies if I've not been able to pick your questions this evening. I'm really out of time already. Professor Akinyemi, thank you very much, sir. And to everyone that has joined today, we look forward to seeing you on Saturday, 2 p.m. The YouTube link is there. The Zoom details are on the screen. You can grab the Zoom details on the screen now, which you can then use to join the session. And if you need to contact us for any details, there's an email address on the screen there. If you want to note that down, info@thruMYeyes.com. Feel free to send an email, and I will get that and we'll pick it up before Saturday. On that note, I'll end the program this evening. Once again, apologies to the two hands I couldn't pick there. Good night, sir, and we'll see you again on Saturday. Good night, everyone.
One, two, go.